So there have been conversations recently about restarting sports leagues around the country. Without having all the details worked out, Major League Baseball, the National Basketball Association, PGA Tour Golf, NASCAR, they've begun to put together plans for how to let their seasons take place while also keeping people safe. It goes without saying then that whatever is worked out, their games will be played without any fans cheering from the stands. Now, you know that the closeness of the fans, their shouting, their close contact with one another, could bring devastating results of the spread of COVID-19. And there's been resistance from some of the players, at least at first, about playing these games in empty arenas. I wasn't entirely surprised by this stance, but it was an interesting affirmation of the role of the fan at a sporting event. Even highly paid professional athletes need the encouragement, the cheering of the fans in order to bring their best to the competition. Without the fans, the game's not even worth it. Now, if you are a sports fan of any kind, you know the difference that the cheering of the fans can make in a game. The regimented chants of the Cameron Crazies at Duke University. The 12th man student section at Texas A&M, standing at the ready in case they're summoned to the field to join the team. The legendary fear of playing in Death Valley at night in Baton Rouge. Or the historic moments in Fenway Park, or the Boston Garden, or the terrible towel of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The commitment of the fans is legendary. The fans provide encouragement for the players, and the players feed off of that energy to achieve feats they would never be able to accomplish without that encouragement. So today, in our With Eager Longing sermon series, we're talking about encouragement. Paul uses this word 4 times in his letter to the Thessalonians that we now call 1 Thessalonians. Just before the verses that we read today, Paul explains how he is in Athens. He's heard that some kind of persecution has broken out against the Thessalonians, and he's so worried about them that they delay their travel plans, and he sends his friend Timothy to go to the Thessalonians to hear how they are and to encourage them. Timothy returns to Paul with the wonderful news that the Thessalonians are remaining faithful to the way of Jesus that Paul and his travel companions first taught them. Paul then finds the faithfulness of the Thessalonians encouraging to him in the struggles and in the challenges of his ministry. So Paul is both an encourager and a receiver of encouragement. The word that we translate encourage comes from a pretty common Greek word, parakaleo. Most woodenly translated, it's a compound word, para, meaning beside or around, and kaleo, meaning to call out. To encourage, then, is to call out from alongside. This is the crowd rising to its feet with its chants to try to get that big third down stop. It's dad giving you the thumbs up as you mount the podium to play that piano recital. It's the note that you receive from a former student telling you what an impact that your teaching had when they were a part of your classroom. Calls from alongside us that enable us to keep doing what we've been tasked to do, or that draw out of us even more than we thought we could accomplish or achieve. Paul knows the power of those who call out from alongside, whose faith in us enables our faith to continue. Paul has had a host of these encouragers in his own faith journey, that inform how he is an encourager to his congregations. If you know anything about Paul, before he was a Christian missionary, he was a devout Pharisaical Jew. He actually went out and rounded up Christians as opposition to the way of his faith. He even oversaw the stoning to death of Stephen, one of the early Christian disciples. But then Paul's on his way to Damascus, and he is blinded by the risen Jesus. He is then taken to a Jesus follower named Ananias. Now, God has already spoken to Paul directly on the road. God doesn't need Ananias, but God chooses Ananias to go to Paul, and thus God establishes the essential nature of the encourager within the Christian life in the church. And it is Ananias who lays his hands on Paul, who restores his sight, and it's by his blessing that Paul receives the Holy Spirit. Through the encouragement of another, in this case Ananias, Paul receives something he never would have possessed on his own. And from there we see all the other places where Paul receives encouragement. Just a few weeks ago, we were reading the letter to the Philippians. We hear of Paul's love and affection for that congregation who encouraged him during his time in prison. In Romans, Paul lays out all of these friends that he has who have shown him encouragement when he needed it. He cites Prisca and Aquila, who risked their necks for me, and Andronicus and Junia, who were with him in prison. He mentions a man named Rufus, and then he highlights Rufus's mother, saying, "For she is my mother too." There are still others. The young Timothy, Silas, Barnabas, those who travel with Paul, encouragers. And if we, like Paul, have received God's encouragement from others, isn't it natural for us to want to become an encourager? In fact, it is mutual encouragement that sustains the life of the church. We hear it in Paul's words here. He says, "For we now live if you continue to stand firm in the Lord." New Testament scholar Beverly Gaventa notes how interwoven the lives of the Christians are, how dependent they are on one another's faith. Here's what she says. One prominent feature of Paul's remarks is that the Thessalonians' faith serves to encourage the apostles in the midst of their own difficulties. The faith of the Thessalonians is not only their private belief or even their corporate belief, something that matters only within their circle. It also belongs to the apostles and to the rest of the church as well. The health of one congregation's faith matters for others. So, consider this study conducted by UC Davis psychologist Robert Emmons. He asked a group of college students to participate in a survey that they would take over a 10-week period. The questions were about sort of the general life of the students. It measured their moods, their sense of gratitude, their daily routines and habits like eating and exercise and sleep. He then subdivided the students into 3 groups. To the first group, he asked them to write down every week in a journal 5 mundane things that happened throughout the week. The second group, in addition to doing their survey, was to keep a journal where they wrote down 5 gripes or complaints about things from the previous week. Small things like a spat with a roommate, or complaining about the food in the cafeteria, or a term paper they don't want to write. And then to the third subcategory, he assigned them to record 5 things in the week that they were grateful for. Now, my guess is you already know the results of this study. They've been confirmed by countless other studies. Here's what Emmons found out. The group that recorded their list of gripes every single week, at the end of the 10 weeks, he could note from their survey results that they had a lower affect. They were breaking their regular habits. It was even altering their regular patterns of sleep. But for those who recorded the things they were grateful for every week, they entered what he called a blessings condition. Their mental and physical health improved. Brain scans showed lower levels of cortisol, the hormone that is associated with stress. They consumed less fat in their diet. They generally did not suffer from depression. And so consider those times when you have bonded with someone else over a gripe or a complaint about a politician, the weather, a rival sports team, or a difficult neighbor. And you feel like you're bonding with this person over your common complaint or your common gripe. You may even have a laugh and share a good time with that person. But the truth is, complaining just for the sake of complaining ultimately is destructive to both parties in the gripe session. An encourager lives by the opposite set of values. An encourager avoids gripes and even goes beyond gratitude. Because you see, I can be grateful for things and I can track them in my journal every night, and that will improve my mental health. But an encourager goes beyond that. Instead of just writing their gratitude in a journal, they go to the person they're grateful for. They express the difference that this person made in their life and how these words or these actions changed or shaped them. And then they offer words of hope that they hope that this person will continue to offer that same kind of love and care to others into the future. That becomes even more powerful than an act of gratitude. As members of my Wednesday Bible study small group pointed out last week when we were together, gratitude focuses on ourselves, on me, what's happened to me, and it lists things that have occurred already in the past. Encouragement puts the focus on another and looks with hopeful anticipation of what could be in the future. In fact, if Paul is right, our encouragement of others sustains our life. And their encouragement of us makes our living possible as well. But our encouragement of others is not just some kind of generic encouragement. It's not the same thing as encouraging somebody to set a new record pace in the marathon or to make the game-winning shot or to perfectly perform the recital piece. Now, our encouragement in the way of faith is to encourage lives that look like Jesus. That means that we encourage in one another love, mercy, compassion. We encourage forgiveness, service to others, acts of praise. So, I've got to sound like Paul today. And I'm hoping, in the midst of this sermon, that somebody's watching this who is going to be our next associate pastor. If not, the AP&C should send this to them, because this is going to be the picture of the church they might one day be called to serve. I have been profoundly encouraged by your faith in this season of separation in so many ways. One are these faithful volunteers who show up in the back of the sanctuary every week to make sure that worship happens online. And last week, one of you incredibly, or several of you, put a sign on the front door of the church thanking these volunteers for coming and making worship happen. I caught Andy Corbin on his way out last week taking a picture of that poster with his phone. He said that made his day. Still others of you have left us messages on the sidewalk in sidewalk chalk, words of encouragement as we come in to do the necessary tasks in the church building. And then I've gotten these letters, some to the church, some to my house, both offering words of gratitude for what we're doing to keep our church connected to one another and to God, but also these profound words that have just ripped open my heart of how your trust in God has grown and how your commitment to the ways of Jesus has expanded in ways that you didn't even know were possible. Then there's others of you who've brought food to our house, quietly left fresh-cut flowers in a vase on the front stoop, people who've sent emails and text messages. There's all of you who log in every week to live stream worship. We watch those head count numbers on YouTube and Facebook, and we are encouraged by your regular participation in these ways. How you keep giving your money to these causes that we lift up, such as RAM this week. How you take care of each other, how you pray for one another, how our children and youth collected over 900 books for the children of the West End Center who are stuck at home at this time, how you're supporting our graduates in this year when graduation looks quite unconventional. That has been more powerful than simply words of thanks. These have been words and deeds of encouragement, calling from alongside, that have renewed my spirit, have renewed my trust in God's provision. God is at work. God is at work in you, and your faith gives me life. So, if you'll allow me to come alongside you, know in every part of your being that you are an instrument of God's grace to me, to my family, to one another, to this community. God is using you to witness powerfully to the truth of the gospel in Jesus Christ, and God's Spirit will continue to sustain us in that witness. So can we agree to give up complaining and griping? They don't get us anywhere. And instead, let's commit to making the prayer of the Apostle Paul for the Thessalonians our prayer to God for one another. For he says, "May the Lord make you increase and abound in love for one another and for all, just as we abound in love for you." Be encouraged. Amen.